Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Read Write Mike podcast, season 2, episode 2, where we're focusing on word love, character, vocabulary. And for a lot of these first sessions, I'm focusing on word love, character, vocabulary for grades K to 2. For those of you who will be doing 3 to 5 or maybe even beyond, you'll be familiar, or you can get yourself familiar with those methods by looking at season 1. The methods that we do in 3 to 5 and above are going to be more similar to the work that we talked about in season 1, whereas season 2, we're going to focus a little bit more on supporting work in K to 2, specifically with word love, character, vocabulary. So let's begin. If you are watching on a screen, you can see me share my page, and I'll show you a little bit of the materials from the pilot units. This is what the pilots worked with. And if you are listening, I will make sure that I describe everything that people are looking at on the screen. So for word love, character, vocabulary, for this episode, we're going to focus on ways to introduce the words. What do you do when you introduce the words, right? So prior to introducing the words, you want to make sure that you read the fairy tale or the folk tale that goes along with the unit. We'll talk about why fairy tales, why folk tales, and more specifics around that in a later episode. But for today, I just want to talk about how do you introduce these words. So once you've read the fairy tale or folk tale, you'll want to then introduce a word. So let's go down to a good one here. Cautious, that was a good one. All right, so usually we teach about 1 or 2 words a day. If 2 is too much, you can always split up the activities into a couple of days. That's up to you. You can sort of play that by ear as kids learn it. So let's take a look at the word cautious. One thing you can see here is we have a beautiful chart made by Kimberly Fox. And on the left-hand side, you'll see the reference to the word as it might appear in the fairy tale. In this case, it's Hansel and Gretel. And on the right-hand side, you'll see how the word appears with regard to the real world. And so you can see a kid on rollerblades with a helmet and knee pads and elbow pads and gloves on, sort of afraid to cross the street, being cautious, right? And so that's how it starts. And then what you'll see here is the way the word is introduced. So first thing that you do when you're introducing vocabulary for K to 2, and this is true for 3 to 5 and above as well, is you place the word in the story context. Where does it appear? Why? It gives a context to the word so that it's real. It's not just a word in the middle of the air. It's not just a word from a random word list. It has meaning. And stories are really great places to have that meaning because we are storytelling creatures. And these fairy tales and folk tales are stories that people have been telling for hundreds of years, if not, in some cases, millennia, like things like Cinderella. Well, I don't know, millennia, but maybe somebody can fact check me on that later. But anyway, let's get back to the introduction of the word. So it says, in Hansel and Gretel, we learned that Hansel was very cautious when he placed the pebbles in the ground so that he and Gretel didn't get lost in the forest. Okay, so step 1, introduce the word into a story context. Give it meaning. It'll be more memorable. Step 2, give a kid-friendly definition. Someone who is cautious is very careful to avoid danger. Great. Then the next step is you want to hear kids say it and maybe give a fun little gesture. Pilot teachers have said the gestures have been really helpful for kids to remember. So it says, put your hands out in front of you and look over your shoulder like you're being super careful and say cautious. So, right, you go like this and say cautious, right? And you have the kids mimic you with it. Then, after you give the word in the story context, give a kid-friendly definition, ask kids to say the word and do a little jazzy gesture. Then you might give and this is different from 3 to 5, by the way, you might give a few more examples of how the word could exist in the real world, right? And you could say something like, you might be cautious if you don't go near a dog that is growling, or you might be cautious if you don't play on the playground with a bunch of big kids right away, right? Okay, and then after that, we play a little game. There's a variety of different games that you can play, but they're all example, non-example games. So if you're familiar with word love for character vocabulary, you'll know these example, non-example games. It's a very basic way to tell kids like, hey, now that I've taught you this thing, can you say back to me, yes or no? Do you know this word? Now in 3-5, we usually play the game yay or nay. And in K2, we play some different games. One game that's very popular that we'll play is, does this make sense? Right? And so does this make sense is essentially the way in which you would tell the kids, you say, does this make sense? Let's play this again. You'd have already played it before because this is, I think, day 2 in this bend. I'll say a sentence and ask you if it makes sense. With your partner, say yes or no and why you think so. Ready? Does this make sense? The cautious boy ran across the street without both ways. And the expected response would be, no, that doesn't make sense, because if you're cautious, you don't want to get in danger, right? So it's things like that. You give a little scenario and you have to ask the kids, does that make sense? So it's the ways in which they can identify the word used correctly or incorrectly. And then you do that several times, and then you wrap up the game with letting them hear the word again and letting them confirm for you what the word means with the definition. So it's something like, tell me the word again. What word means to be careful to avoid danger? Cautious. Great. And so that's how you introduce the words. Let's go over that again. The way that you introduce the words is put it in a story context, give a kid-friendly definition, ask them to say the word with a gesture, give them a couple more examples of how the word exists in the world, play an example, non-example game. Let's hear the word again with the definition. That's how you introduce the words. Those are the steps. If you'd like some bonus content on the ways in which these example, non-example games are different for K1 and 2, especially based on the pilot feedback, feel free to subscribe on the buttons below or associated with the website or app that you're currently on. Word Love is currently not for profit, and so we are very grateful for any support that you can give to help keep the curriculum and the materials free. Thanks.